Welcome back to the Reboot Era, where we talk about layoffs, reinvention, and everything the job search doesn't prepare you for. In today's episode, you're hearing from two incredibly talented recruiters who are not only experts in what they do, but also happen to be near and dear to my heart. These conversations are honest, insightful, and honestly kind of comforting. We get into what recruiters actually look for, how decisions are made behind the scenes, and the real reason you might not have heard back after that final round. Whether you're on the job hunt, in the thick of it, or just trying to understand what the hell is going on out there, this episode is for you.
My name is Kylie Simonovich. I work for a consulting services company based out of Minneapolis and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I've been with the company now for about 4 years and a few months as a technical experience recruiter. So within our actual company, I work within a specialized program for associate level consultants between like 0 to 3 years of experience. I work primarily more on our experience side. So we're doing specialized hiring within specific career tracks. So think business analysis, data analysis, software engineering, product ownership, process improvement, project management. So we're hiring for these specific roles from a more boutique style consulting side of things. So a lot of consulting companies, when you think of it, only have you as those full-time salaried consultants. You don't really go to the client. You never really meet the client face to face, or not as much as probably what we do. Our consultants are pretty much on site with our clients, and they do have the opportunity to go full-time with our clients as well after their client assignment is done. So it's been a lot of fun working with the team, the company. I've kept in touch with a lot of my candidates over the years, and I am really excited to see where this next year goes, because this market, as we all know, is a very unique and more difficult market that we are all trying to navigate nowadays.
It's so true, and that's why I reached out. So Kylie and I went to Bryant University, what feels like yesterday, but also feels like 50 years ago. And it's actually been, 8, 9 years now since we've graduated. We graduated in 2017. So yeah, 8 years ago.
I'm still stuck in my head, I'm still stuck at the age of 25 when COVID kind of started.
Yeah.
And I feel like, university, going to college, being in your undergrad, it was to me, feels like it was yesterday. I feel like I could still party and stay up and do all of the things we used to do. And now,
Yeah.
like for my own personal reasons, just don't really drink. I go to bed at 9 p.m.
And for anyone who listens to this who doesn't know who Kylie is, that's not who Kylie was in college.
That is not.
She wasn't that girl. But it's funny because I've heard people have podcasts and they talk about like, oh, I knew this person in college. I think we have to like lay the land a little bit. We took a Chinese class together freshman year, right?
And I use no Chinese in my day-to-day life
But
at
that's
all.
okay. That is totally fine. Kylie was a cheerleader. She was very outgoing. I think everyone knew you. You knew everyone. You were very well known on campus. And there was one year where we lived side by side. My suite was next to her suite. And so I could basically pound on the brick wall. And when we had phones, and I think the only calls I ever made was to her room to ask her questions.
Oh,
Great
I
times.
forgot about the phones.
And this was our sophomore year that I think we lived next to each other, right?
Hall 2.
Yeah, hall 2.
Oh, right next to the fraternities and sororities
Very
and
loud. I hated that.
oh yeah, I remember you hated that. I slept through
Yeah.
anything.
We
So
know. We know.
I just
I was
kind
in
of
your
just
room more times
dealt
than
with
you
it.
know because you were sleeping, and I was just like in there talking to your roommates, and you were like, "You're here again?" Yeah, I am actually.
Yeah, of course.
That was a good year. Throwbacks.
It was so fun.
It was. And it's great to see, how far you've come and how far we both have grown in
So
our careers. You're a recruiter. Did you ever think you would be a recruiter? Was that the goal?
no. So I think when I was coming up from graduation, I didn't take interviewing and applying as seriously as I probably should have. Everything happens the way it's supposed to. And honestly, when I was younger, as we all know, I was just very much like flying by the seat of my pants, things are just gonna happen. I'll get there eventually. And I think from meeting my ex-partner in China and then deciding to move to Minneapolis, at that point, I had kind of thought to myself, well, fit. I don't need to have a job right out of college because I'm moving anyway. I've kind of decided that in my mind. And once I stick to something, I'm not giving that up. But then also at the same time that fear snuck in of what if you get there and you literally can't pay your bills, which by the way at the time was a $350 rent per month, I believe, in a house with these grad students, which Lord, please give me a $350 mortgage, or I would love that.
Yeah, goals.
But at that time, I think just who I am as a person, I was like, well, if worst comes to worst, I work in a restaurant, I go get a job as a waitress and I figure it out. That's just who I am. And when I found my first opportunity as a recruiter with company tech systems, I didn't really fully know what a recruiter was. I didn't know that finding jobs for people was an actual job. As I think a lot of students, you don't realize a lot of jobs are the jobs that are in the working corporate field until you get there. And my dad was always in sales and he's a talker. And I was like, hey, he's a talker. I'm a talker. I can totally do this, thinking it would be a lot easier than it was. Talking definitely does come natural to me, and I found a knack within the job for myself, and I ended up truly loving it and falling in love with it. That company just wasn't the right fit for me in the end. I am not a work hard, play hard sales bro culture type of recruiter. I need work life balance and let me go to the gym and trust me, I will get my work done type of girl. So it took a few years to get to a company, Turnberry, that really values my work and trusts me as an employee and as an adult. But, the journey was worth getting here and now couldn't be happier.
Good. And is that all you're doing, or do you have other work that you're doing in combination?
No, I'm just well, I mean, there's the little things and nuances of being a recruiter. There's lead generation that we can do, helping sales find candidates. And I guess I'm trying to think within our role. I mean, we have little projects that we can help out with. And there's also employee resource groups within our organization, as most orgs typically have. But I'm a part of one called Well and Able, which is our mental health and wellness. So, kind of divvying up between mental health as well as obviously that physical health side of things. But it's not necessarily per se part of my job that I need to be doing, but it is something that I do like to be a part of and be integrated in. And which just talking about this, we have a PPC, which is called a party planning committee. So whenever we have fun things for our crew team, we have a little party planning committee. So we find different fun aspects that we can have, dabble in with our role. But primarily, I am always recruiting for different opportunities, matching those candidates with different roles and clients that we have available and that are currently open. There's definitely finesse to recruiting, I would say, as candidates don't always see the backside of things or understanding how a hiring manager wants a specific candidate, and also dealing with today's day and age of making sure we're following D&I policies and procedures. And is it a contract? Is it contract to hire? Is it a salaried role? Understanding benefits and PTO and navigating more difficult conversations with candidates as well. So, beyond just the recruiting and finding candidates, we also have some of those not so fun aspects of
Yeah.
the job as well.
Could you walk us through like what's a typical day for you?
Yeah, so we do have per week. We have a few stand-up meetings, so on Monday and Wednesday, we do have our client engagement team or our sales team. We have a regional breakup of meetings so that all of our recruiters can meet with those specific teams that are within those regions to get updates. Where are candidates at? Where are opportunities at? Where do they need more candidates for certain opportunities? Or maybe, hey, I just had a call with a hiring manager and this opportunity is coming. Again, I primarily work within our crew side of opportunities, so 0 to 3 year, and then we do have mid-senior level recruiters as well. I have worked on our mid-senior team, and depending on fluctuation of roles and what client demand looks like, I will jump into some of those mid-senior roles as well if they need extra capacity. So that's what we typically do on Monday and Wednesday, and then on Thursdays, we also have a whole, like, all team, hands on deck, both sales team and recruiters diving into these opportunities. Again, just to give high visibility of what is going on, what is getting filled, what needs to get filled. So that those calls really set me up for my days and where I need to prioritize. But there's also meetings and calls that are within those from my prior reach outs when I'm looking for those other opportunities from the week prior or the day prior. So, depending on what that looks like, because that can fluctuate day to day, and when a candidate can find time on my calendar or has time available if they're working currently, that can look different. Today, for example, I had 3 interviews back to back, all 30 minutes, and then I had 3 calls. And then we actually had a training 30-minute call as well, and we had our hour-long sales and recruiting meeting, and then we had just kind of a crew program specific meeting just with my team of crew recruiters and our manager, again, to just dive into where we may need candidates and figure out where our priorities and focus are for the day. So I only had 2 30-minute breaks in between some of those times,
Hmm.
and I was sourcing for different opportunities and also utilizing some of that time for more admin work. So after this, I probably will go do a little bit more sourcing just to set me up for next week and tomorrow. But typically, I'll have introductory calls, which I'll have as like 15 minutes just to tell the candidate a little bit more about the company, what we're looking for, make sure we're aligned with salary expectations. And from there, if everything aligns, then we move forward with a first round interview. I would never want to make a candidate sit on a 30-minute interview if it's not going to align with what they're looking for or where they're at in their career search. I'll also have those interviews that are around 20 to 30 minutes to dive in deeper with a candidate's experience to better understand, are they a fit for not only our crew program, but the typical types of roles that we're seeing. This market is so unique in the sense of hiring managers want very specific candidates. They want unicorns. They want multiple people in one role. And especially with where I hire for experienced candidates 0 to 3 years, some of these people don't exist all the
Yeah.
time. And really having to dive in deep with those interviews to find the right candidates. And depending on how those calls or interviews go, either moving them to second round interviews or getting a profile made up and sending it over to our sales team and saying, I met with this candidate, they're a great fit for this role because of XYZ, and having to dive in deeper there with the sales team. So depending on how my week is set up with candidate calls and interviews, it can really depend on a varying day by day. I kind of wake up each morning and check my phone to see what my day is structured like, to then say, where can I fit in maybe a quick workout or where can I fit in lunch?
When are you reviewing resumes? Are you reading every resume that comes in? Like, and let's just say, let's preface with the fact that I'm only asking you answer from your perspective. You're not talking on behalf of your company or any company. Just What do you do? What's your preference style? Are you reading all of the resumes that are coming in, and when do you get to them?
So when we have a new role that's come out, we typically will get it posted externally onto our company page, and it also gets posted to LinkedIn as when we're attached. So we essentially are attached as an owner of that opportunity. So all of those applicants that are applying are getting sent to me via email. For example, we had a role that was posted, let's just say it was like 5 p.m. on Wednesday night. By Thursday morning, I had probably over 100 emails in my inbox. And that's a lot. So when I take a look at that, it really does come down to different variances. Where is the candidate located? So we hire out of specific core locations. So I do have to take that into consideration. If there were no one, applying in the core locations, I may reach out to some of those other candidates to see if they're open to relocating because you never know if you don't ask. But when I'm looking at resumes, I'm taking maybe at most 30 seconds to look at a resume. Typically, it is going to be 15 seconds. For me, I would say it's a little bit easier because I am within a specialized program hiring into very broad career tracks. So we're not looking for super specific experience per se. We are, but we have a little bit of leeway and wiggle room in terms of technologies, or are you an associate versus senior associate? Because our different clients and opportunities are going to vary, and we do have a training and development side of things where we can be a little bit, it can be easier to find those candidates.
So
If I
15 seconds isn't a lot of time, right? Sorry to
no,
interrupt, but 15
oh
seconds
no,
is not a lot of time. I mean, I think I spend less time swiping on like Tinder or something, but 15 seconds, I'm looking at your face and going, yes or no. So what are you looking at in 15 to 30 seconds? Because I don't have a picture attached to my resume.
yeah, no. So, first thing is part of our qualification, you do need to have your bachelor's degree completed. So, I do check for a bachelor's degree or anything higher. And then I take a look and see is there any relevant experience. So, if you have work experience and it says data analyst and you've been there for maybe 6 months, I'm like, yep, okay, that's perfect. They're in a core location, they're in Minneapolis. Okay, check, check. They have some years of experience. Right now, we do have, so to kind of backtrack, we do have a dedicated team for campus hiring. So if it does say that they graduated spring 2025, probably am not going to reach out to them at this time because our campus hiring has already passed. We already have a class of 20 candidates coming in July. So we're not going to hire those new associates with 0 years of experience coming out of college because we've already done that hiring. I may revisit them in a few months, see if they've gotten a role or if they're still interested. But when it comes to candidates with experience, I'm really looking for do they have a bachelor's degree? Are they in one of our core locations? And do they have some relevant experience? Have they been a project coordinator or project manager, or maybe they were some type of coordinator that they can have transferable skills. If I see a candidate with more experience, let's just say 2 to 5 years, I may take a little bit more time to look at their resume just to ensure that is this really relevant? Again, I can hire with our mid level side and look at hourly contractors. So I will take a little bit more time on some of those more experienced candidates. I probably wouldn't spend more than 45 seconds to a minute on a
Yeah,
candidate's resume.
just because you have so many to go through.
Yeah. And
Got
when
it.
I'm meeting these candidates, and I think this is a learned skill that you do have to kind of pick up, is I'm not an internal recruiter for one company where it's I know this company like the back of my hand. I'm working with so many different clients that I could meet with someone and they may not be a fit for the opportunity they applied for, but then I could keep in touch with them and I can get to know them a little bit better and then say, oh, this role just came out. Oh my god, I met with a candidate who would be a good fit for this, and I can then go back in my notes or I can go back into my interviews and see that I did
Yeah.
meet with that candidate.
Can we talk about that for a second? A lot of people
Yeah.
often post and say things about their experience being like, my favorite is we think you're a great fit, but then 5 minutes later, you get an email saying, we've decided to move forward with other candidates. And it's like, let's keep in touch. And it's kind of like dating when you're on the apps and you're meeting someone and they're just like, "Ah, you're so amazing. Let's just be friends though." And it's like, okay, how
Yes.
am I supposed to take this? Like, are you going to reach out back out to me? Should I be reaching out to you? Do I send you the jobs I'm interested in as a recruiter and say, "Hey, thanks for saying that. Here's the other job I was interested in and you can do something with that?" Like, what do you recommend? What's your advice?
Ask for feedback to better understand maybe where you missed the mark or, hey, I definitely want to keep in touch. Is there anything I can improve upon? I send very different emails out to candidates depending on the feedback that I'm giving. If they're just not going to be a fit for our crew program and they're not going to be a fit for the types of roles we have, I am going to send a more, this is just a rejection. It's not a apply later. Even though maybe in 6 months they could gain more experience and improve, I'm meeting with probably, I think last month I had over 30 or like 30 to 35 interviews. I mean, that's one a day, which is, you don't think is a lot, but I'm still having calls on top of those. And then also keeping track of those candidates for the different roles we have. It is one of those balanced things where I do pride myself on the relationships that I'm building with these candidates and trying to remember everything. And at the same time, ensuring that candidate experience, but also I do need to move somewhat quickly because
Mhm.
there is a timeline of things that candidates don't always see on the background or don't hear about. There is probably a lot more information sometimes that happens or may happen that we can't always disclose to a candidate, but I personally try to keep in touch with those candidates. If it's a candidate that I'm saying, "Hey, we'd like to keep in touch," I'm usually getting on the phone with those candidates briefly, real quick, and just picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, like, here's why," because we may not have roles right now.
Okay. Have you ever forgot about a candidate? Have you ever forgot to send the email? You said, I'll follow up on Friday, but you didn't follow up on Friday.
Oh my god, yes. That does happen. That does happen, and I feel so bad because it really isn't intentional at all. I am sure because, again, people are people. We can't really control always what people do, and there are some really horrible people out there. So I'm sure there are recruiters that are more a-holes. I have worked with them that just don't care. They're like, "Whatever, I'll get to it when I get to it." I have done that, and I like, have emailed on the weekends. I'm on my phone just, like, emailing, and I'm like, "I am so sorry."
Is it always, and in these instances, is it because you forget to reach out, or is it sometimes because you thought you were going to get the decision and then you never got the information you needed? So following up is going to be, hey, I don't have an answer for you yet. I'm sorry.
I will say it's happened more than I would like it to have happened. I have been in this career that does count on follow-up for over 8 years. It has happened, and it's a little bit of both. There has been times where I haven't reached out because I didn't get an update. And honestly, I do typically send a candidate an update email saying I don't have an update because I know I would rather get an email saying that, even though that sucks and there's nothing you can really do.
If a candidate nudges you on Friday and says, hey, like just checking in, it's noon. You said you'd follow up. You haven't followed up yet. Any update?
Please, please do it.
In recruiting, are you utilizing AI or automation? ATS seems to be a really big thing that people talk about to kind of filter through resumes quickly. Like, are you guys using anything like that right now?
So we don't really use an ATS, or I don't per se. I mean, I use LinkedIn Recruiter. There is an AI specific function within LinkedIn Recruiter now. Funny enough, we did just have a training on it and how to utilize it within LinkedIn Recruiter. It is hard because there are aspects of it that are so great and can find candidates. There's also a not so great aspect of using AI when trying to find candidates. We're also doing a training in general on AI and just the bias.
Like, what types of things is good on this LinkedIn recruiter or an AI kind of model?
It's nice because I'm able to specifically target certain candidates so I can put in keywords and location and specific tools and technologies to find, or I can put in a job description and it pulls a whole pool of candidates from that. And if I take a look at those first batch of candidates and let's just say it's not what I'm looking for, I can refine the search with the tool. And I do really appreciate that.
And what about the downsides? Have you ever missed a candidate or felt like maybe you missed out on a candidate because you looked at AI and you were like, wait, why didn't this candidate come up?
AI in general isn't going to be perfect, as we all know. And again, there are going to be some biases with data that is getting pulled when you're doing some specific searches. And that's why I try to have a balance with it.
Is it better to apply directly on LinkedIn where you have the easy apply button and it takes you 2 seconds? Is it better to go to the company's website and apply directly to the website? I know you don't interview or recruit specifically for one company, but I know you have before. What's that difference like?
I guess from the candidate perspective, it's probably easier.
But
And
is
it's
easier better? That's the question here, right?
I was just gonna say, is easier truly better? I think it really comes down to a candidate's time when applying. And also, and I think with Turnberry, it does redirect them to their page or with to our page. So even though we're hiring for different clients and different opportunities, it's still redirecting to our page and you still have to fill everything out.
Yeah.
It is nice. And I think it gives us more information because we also ask, are you open to relocation? Where are the locations that you would be open to? What career tracks are you open to, if not the one that you're currently in? So we do ask, I think, more questions that can pull on our generic experience application from online. But again, does this candidate truly want this role? Are they just filling it out as quickly as possible to just maybe get a call back? Or again, just hitting the easy LinkedIn apply. My resume is already here. I just need a job.
What is the best advice that you've heard or that you would give to candidates who are out there in 2025 looking for a job?
I think just for me, staying diligent, keep working at it, especially when you're going into interviews. To me personally, what stands out is even if a candidate, again, like I said, isn't the right fit for this job, the way they interview or respond to questions is going to stand out. If you know you don't have a certain aspect of the job, responsibility, description, tool, technology, whatever that may be, try and explain how you would go about learning it. Or maybe you have, again, a similar tool that you had experience with, and that can be transferable. I always talk about the power of learning and expanding your knowledge and experience. And if you can put that into words from your prior experience into something that you're looking at going for, that can make a difference. Because again, if you're a standout candidate, yes, it's not the best that you're not a fit for this role, but you will stand out to a recruiter and they'll remember you. Oh my God, I remember meeting that person. I remember them saying this. This is the role for them. And I have had candidates like that come through and we have found jobs for them. So I always tell candidates, stay diligent, stay up to date with what's going on in the market. Ask the questions that maybe you don't want to ask. Sometimes it's not as bad as you think it is.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just getting on the phone and talking to the recruiter and better understanding.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that's great advice. Are you open to people who hear this episode looking you up on LinkedIn and connecting with you and
Yeah.
asking questions if they have questions? Obviously, not a sales pitch, but hey, here's my resume. I'm looking for this kind of job. If you posted about a job that was interesting, if you have the time, giving it a read. 15
I'll
seconds, of course.
take a little bit more time on a resume if someone's reaching out to me on LinkedIn. Promise.
Okay, so if your brain is spinning with how many resumes Kylie has looked at this week alone, same. I love that conversation because it reminded me just how nuanced recruiting really is, especially in this weird post-layoff 2025 economy. Now, let's shift gears a little bit. Up next is Amanda Ju, a rockstar recruiter I met during my time at CrowdStrike. Amanda's approach to transparency, candidate support, and negotiation is what every job seeker wishes they had on their side. We get into everything, from what her LinkedIn inbox really looks like to how much influence recruiters have in leveling decisions and salary ranges. So let's hear what she has to say.
My name is Amanda Ju, and I've been a technical recruiter for the last 5 years. I worked at both early to mid-stage startups and previously at a larger public company called CrowdStrike, where I met Trey. I actually hired him and worked together closely. So very excited to talk with you guys today.
Thanks for that. And it's cool to connect with you again. So I'm excited about where our futures are going to go. And I'm excited to have you on this podcast as a guest. I wanted to talk about recruitment. So can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen over the last few years and just like the shift of the amount of applicants and, you know, what you're seeing? Is it all qualified applicants applying to positions, or are you getting like 50% qualified applicants?
Yeah, definitely. I think when I first started, it really depends on like the size and stage of the company that you work at. Obviously, with like smaller to medium-sized startups, you're not getting as high volume as like a bigger public company. Once you move into a bigger public company, I think a lot of the focus is, we are dealing with high volume of applications. Sometimes that can range to 500 applicants per role. So in that sense, companies can be a little bit more picky with, who they want to interview and hire. From a recruiter's perspective, I think the main thing that I think about is it a good technical fit, good cultural fit? So we definitely make sure to kind of suss that out during the interview with, pre-qualified questions or questions that hiring managers have questions about. I think what has changed in the market is that, in the past when there are job hoppers or people who have really short-term roles, I think employers are being a little bit more forgiving in that sense, where they are pretty understanding that, layoffs are happening constantly left and right. And, sometimes it's, out of our control. So one thing that we can do is make sure to just talk about it with candidates and kind of see what are their motivations for moving companies or leaving companies, and seeing, if they're a good fit long term for the company. So I think from a company perspective, they really want to make sure that it's a long-term investment and that that candidate, is going to be happy there, in the future, and not possibly, leave within a few months or a year.
Right. And we should probably preface with the fact that what you're sharing is all your opinions. You're not speaking on behalf of any one company. This is just what you've seen and what you've done as an awesome recruiter. I loved my time working with you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Of course. I've never spoken to a recruiter in this fashion. Usually it's just to get a job or to have an interview. And I'm not the one asking questions. So, my questions are largely just going to be around what you can share. So what's your LinkedIn look like? Do you get a ton of messages as a recruiter?
Yeah, I think when I initially started out, honestly, it was not too many messages. But when you join a well-known company or the company is, famous, I think that creates more of a line of, interest from candidates because they know the name, they know the company. I do get a lot of messages. I think right now I have like 782. I try to accept and respond to as much as I can. But obviously, there's like so much you can do as a recruiter. For people who are looking for jobs or messaging recruiters or managers, I would say one of my key pieces of advice is making sure that you are being intentional with your messaging. So a lot of times what I get from candidates or perspectives is, oh, do you think I'm a good fit? This is my experience. And technically, like what a recruiter or manager wants is a role that you're actually interested in on the careers page and sending over your resume. And sometimes the recruiter's not even working on that particular position, but they can always like forward you over to someone that's hiring if you're a good fit. But usually my best recommendation is like go ahead and apply to the role just because we don't know how long the position's going to be open for or how long candidates have been in the process. So I think in that sense, just providing them with as much information as possible. But obviously, there's like an extent to like what we can do on our side, just because we are handling like multiple recs at a time.
Got it. And I had this like weird thought the other day. I was literally like, you know what I don't know is what it looks like on the recruiter side, right? I know that I send in the application and I've applied. Do you sit there every day? Like, what's a typical day? Do you open it and you're just going through every single application? Do you have fields that say, like, these are the qualifieds, these are non qualified? Like, what does it look like from your perspective?
Yeah, so there are differing filtering mechanisms based on whatever applicant tracking system a company uses. I do think one of the misconceptions in recruiting is that recruiters don't look at resumes. I honestly do look at every single resume, but when you are dealing with high volume, there are like key aspects that you're looking for. So there are ways to kind of filter out candidates and kind of look along that end. But I think keeping an open mind is, important as a recruiter because you don't want to potentially reject someone who might not have the best resume. But if you go into their LinkedIn profile, which I tend to do, I like to look at the recommendations that person has because I think that speaks a lot of volumes above and beyond what the resume can tell you. And sometimes, like, if there's something missing that I feel like a manager would really love, I would ask them to like update the resume before submitting it to the hiring manager after I have that call with them. So I try to put them in the best place possible so that when they get in front of the actual hiring team, that, their resume kind of fits what we're looking for there.
Got it. And I know you are, I can speak to this piece, like you are very communicative. You've given me a lot of transparency when I was going through, I actually read through our emails from a few years ago when I was getting hired. And I was like, this is so funny. Like she was on top of it. You were happy to take my call at any time, even though I wasn't in the final round yet. You were just very on top of it. And that's not the experience every candidate gets. Do you, when you log in, let's say you post a position on Monday, are you checking on Monday to see what's come in?
Yeah, so going back to your initial question, on a day to day, the first thing I do is like look at my emails, see like my priority levels, and then I'll go into reviewing applications. Sometimes that can take 1 to 2 hours a day, just depending on how many positions and how many applicants you're looking at. And then as a recruiter, you're kind of looking at the pipeline, making sure that you're not putting too many candidates through and you're focusing on quality. And then towards the end of the day, throughout the middle of the day, actually, you're doing a lot of calls, you're doing a lot of feedback, sending over information to the hiring managers. And at the very end of the day, that's when I kind of do my own sourcing for about an hour. And then I finish up reviewing any additional applicants. So I would say I allocate like at least 1 to 2 hours every day just for reviewing applicants. That way it's not going to backlog and you just have like an insane and volume of candidates by the end of the week.
I think the insight is awesome. I'm trying to think of just questions that people I've heard or misconceptions that are out there.
Yeah.
Would you say like one thing that came up earlier, I was having a conversation with an awesome person and they were talking about the length of time that goes between communications. And so, let's say I applied today, you reached out 3 days later and you said, hey, I think you're a great fit. Let's do a first round phone screen interview. How, like, for your perspective, how likely are you to like keep in touch with people? Is it every few days? Is it once a week?
Yeah. So in terms of like timeline of communication and transparency, obviously I try to move as fast as possible, but you obviously don't want to, reach out to a candidate if you don't have all of the information that's 100% correct. I've been in situations like where if I move too fast, then, the candidate gets a little bit hopeful, and then all of a sudden we have a stronger candidate in the pipeline that the manager really loves. So I think it's just being, 100% sure that, we're going to move that person on and making sure that I'm putting together prep material for each interview so that candidate is set up for success. So I would say timeline wise, from applicant review to phone screen, maybe like 1 to 2 days. From like first recruiter screen to hiring manager screen, that can take up to a week in terms of, depending when the hiring manager responds or their availability. And then technical screens are usually pretty fast just because you pull from like a bucket of interviewers. And then for on-site, sometimes people like to push out their on-site interviews so they have enough time to prep for coding rounds or system design. Companies do system design live, and some companies do like a take home. So it really depends. And then I would say usually if like all goes well with the process, it should take about a month. And then, if companies really love, a candidate, then they'll make a decision right away. If they want to wait until all of the candidates finish the final interviews, maybe about a week or so. But if that's the case, just letting the candidates know that, you were the first candidate in the process. We do want to finish all of the other interviews before making a decision here. And then just keeping them as warm as possible and providing feedback on like what they did well and what they didn't do well as much as possible.
Got it. How much leverage does the recruiter actually have in the decision?
Yeah, I mean, as a recruiter, I try not to bias the teams too much, but there are times where, like, if you do have a really close relationship with the hiring manager, there is a, relationship of trust that's built. So they do take, like, our opinions into consideration. I think from a candidate's perspective, the main thing that we're trying to look for is any red flags. So, like, if someone's like too comp motivated or, are not interested in remote job and they want something hybrid, I think it's important to like be able to flag that to the hiring manager and suss out is that important in our decision. There are like other things that obviously we want to keep a little bit more private. If it's like a personal matter, personal issues with the candidate, ultimately is the call that we make as recruiters is if that's something that we want to share with the hiring manager and team, or if that's like even like in relation to the position. So I think it goes both ways. We do have some influence, but at the same time, we're not like the deal breaker here.
One, overarching question that I think comes up a lot is the comp. Do you openly say how much money you want to make in the beginning? There are situations where you hear the jobs being posted, the salary range is 90,000 to 150, which is such a big range. They say that's the base salary, but then they come and they say, well, we're giving you stock, so technically like your base is going to be lower. How transparent do you want candidates to be in the beginning? Is that like a first question you ask, or is it something that like once you've gotten closer to the final round, you start to have those conversations?
I think as a recruiter, it's very important to have those discussions early on. I think when there's a mismatch in compensation expectations, you can get all the way to final interview and offer, and then you're not giving a candidate an offer that they would be happy about or that at least matches or goes above their current salary. From a legal perspective, recruiters cannot ask for your current salary as by law, but recently California did instate some legal terms where on every job posting, we do have to post the salary bands for the base salary and then bonus and then equity, but mostly for base. And that salary range can be pretty broad just depending on where you're located out of. So it's not like an exact band, just to be completely honest. It can fluctuate depending on a lot of different, factors. I think the main one is honestly interview performance, but we do have like compensation teams internally that do market adjustments to make sure that we are giving like fair and equitable compensation there. If I did give any advice to candidates, I would say have a range in mind, but say, I'm flexible. Maybe say this is my minimum that I would be willing to accept, and then ask, if that's something that the company can potentially offer. Obviously, like we can't promise as recruiters what salary just because you haven't gone through the entire process and been leveled, but we can give you a better understanding of what to expect there.
as you go through those rounds, and maybe you've even had this happen to yourself, but let's say you start the interview process and, they ask you for that range or you decide to share that range and you're just like, hey, I would really like, minimum 100,000 and up. But my target, my goal is to get like 110. That's where I'd like to come in at. And then you go through those interviews, and maybe it's 3, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 7 rounds of interviews. And through those interviews, you realize that this is a lot tougher than you thought. They are really expecting a lot of you. And in your head, that number is now changing. You're like, you know what? If I was to come on, the amount of work that I really think you're expecting of me, I need at least 120. That's my new range. Have you had instances like that? And how do you advise candidates kind of go through that of like, they've been through the interview process, they get the offer, you came in where they said originally, but they're like, actually, I need more.
Yeah, in response to that, I think it's like in relation to the standards set of like the current engineering organization. So if there is a lot of work or a lot of expectations, in terms of time and amount of hours you're putting in, that can be proportional to, the level of where the current team is. So you have to think about it in terms of like, the company's investing a lot of time into hiring and onboarding you and not expecting you to like ramp up right away. Obviously, there depends on ramp up time. And a lot of it is making sure that you're meeting that standard. And if you do exceed, then obviously there are like performance review cycles, either yearly or bi-yearly, and even off-cycle performance reviews. So there's a lot of opportunities to get bumped up once you join. But I think what companies are really looking for is you proving that you deserve that compensation or that level and being able to kind of integrate yourself into the system. Just because there's a lot of, learnings you have to do too, a lot of trainings, a lot of product sessions. So there's a lot of investment from the company's perspective.
What about when you interview? And let's just say the position's posted as a level 2, wherever that is in the company. And you're coming in, you're interviewing, and maybe you're right on the cusp of like, I left a company and I was a senior, and now I'm interviewing for a level 2. I don't quite understand the hierarchy at this new company I'm interviewing for. And as the recruiter, are you telling people like, hey, you're overqualified, you really would be better fit at this level? Are you not sharing that and you're putting them through anyways because you're like, hey, you're a great fit, you have all of the qualifications? And if they come back and say, hey, I love this job, thanks for the offer, but is there any way we can make this a level higher? Like, can you just talk about those kind of instances?
Yeah, so I honestly will defer to the hiring manager to make that call before we even put them through the process. If I purely think that they're a senior, then obviously I will recommend a position that aligns more with their leveling and compensation. But usually after I have that initial recruiter screen, I'll go back to the hiring manager and be like, do you want to interview this candidate and level set them? Sometimes we do have like a senior position, but we're also hiring an engineer 3. So it really depends on how much like headcount and levels we're hiring for that particular team. But I think what a lot of companies do really well is that if you're not a good fit for this team, if you get downgraded or up leveled, we can always recommend you to another team. And usually you don't have to go through that entire process again, but obviously be able to meet like your potential teammates and manager. So I would say we try to make sure that it's the best fit also for the candidate, just because we want to make sure that they're set up for success too.
So it really is like, in most times throughout that process, it's thought of, right? When you're looking at our qualifications, you've had that first round interview, you're trying to assess like, are you truly at the senior level? Is there a better fit level for you? And making sure that both the hiring manager and the team is like comfortable moving forward in that specific position level.
Yeah, and I think a big thing is like some candidates are a little bit more picky about retaining that senior title or staff title, but every company has leveling that is very different. So making sure that the candidate understands what the equivalent is at the current company and asking, are you okay with this, or do you need that title? And if they're focused on title, they might not be the best fit because the expectations are quite different across, different companies.
Is there anything that you would share just like in this current economy of a ton of people that like are laid off, advice, wisdom, anything that you want to share?
Yeah, so I think in the past, like when you think about layoffs, you think like, sales and recruiting are the first to go. But the market has changed and been quite volatile in a way that even software engineering jobs are not quite safe nowadays. And a lot of companies are, looking to cut budgets and be more mindful about who they're hiring, or if they're over hiring, there's that case too. I would say the best times to look for jobs are probably like the beginning to middle of the year. When I looked in the past, I think around December, November, that's probably like the worst time to look just because people are going off for holidays and most of the headcount gets filled. But by the time like January, February, or even June rolls around, there's plenty of headcount. So I would say it's very like seasonal based in a way. And the market does change constantly. For recruiters, I would say, it used to be a lot of full-time roles, and now a lot of them are contract roles for really good companies. And that's just the way companies do it nowadays, is because, contract does pay a lot higher, but you're not getting like the full-time benefits. So there's like give and take there where they're like sourcing out from agencies to hire contractors in order to help the current team with the workload. But, once you kind of have proven yourself and done the work, then they're willing to, convert you to full time. So there's like a good mix of, the market is changing quite a bit. And it's definitely not the same as it was, let's say, like 4 years ago.
Yeah, always changing. And with this Reboot Era podcast and thing, really just trying to start a conversation and really build a network of people who are all impacted by something that maybe you didn't see coming. So thank you for being here. Are you open to people connecting with you on LinkedIn if they so choose? If they find you, if you're working somewhere in the future that they're interested in, are you open to just connections coming in?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, I try to respond to as many like requests as possible, but sometimes I'm not like constantly checking in it, especially now. But I'm always willing to like give advice or do like interview prep with candidates as long as they know like what they're looking for and have a strong sense of like, I need help with this and that versus like, can you find me an internship? I feel like that would be very hard for me, especially if I'm not working on intern roles. So just being intentional with how you message a recruiter and reach out over LinkedIn is super important and will put you in like the best place possible.
Great. Well, thank you. That's super awesome. That's a wrap on today's episode of the Reboot Era. Huge shout out to both Kylie and Amanda for giving us the kind of transparency we rarely get to see on the job search. If you're a candidate out there navigating this roller coaster market in 2025, I hope you walk away with more confidence and clarity, and maybe a few extra notes for your next recruiter screen. If you want to connect with Kylie or Amanda, check the show notes for their LinkedIn profiles. And if the episode hits home, share it with a friend, leave a review, or just scream into the void. Either way, we're all rebooting together. Catch you next time.